would you say there's a difference though between like what we commonly think of as fairy tales and how we would typically structure a story today? I mean, they're often like something today, people will say this is very fairy tale like. And that was something that has been said about Ocean, for example. It has like a fairy tale like feel, which is a compliment. It usually, I think. And what works about, I mean, fairy tales themselves work as fairy tales. Is there something though? I mean, obviously we're all just telling a story. So what are we trying to do when, and how do we adapt to that?
I feel like I love this. I feel like this is one of those wonderful questions that will continue creating more heads of questions, because it does feel like, what is a fairy tale? How do we use it? What is not a fairy tale? Is a wonderful question. And when I think about a few things, and maybe one place to start is thinking about a very obvious difference between fairy tale and life writing, which is that in a fairy tale, we usually have a very clear ending of either happy for some, red hot shoes and eyes poked out by doves for others. So there's sort of a very it goes one or the other, either marriage and gold or something else. And in life writing, when we're writing memoir, or we'll start with life writing because we can do all sorts of other things in other genres. We are the writer, and we are alive to write the end, to take the reader to some sort of ledge where we leave them and leave them feeling that there's some, even subtle, not shoved over them like a cage, but some subtle elixir, in both fairy tales and memoir, like someone goes to the woods and learns something and is maybe a little wiser. But in memoir, as far as I can tell, and I'm sure there are other ways to see this, but this is what I always come back to when reading the ones that I love. There are really only two possible endings, because we can't end with "we all lived happily ever after," because we don't know that. Who knows what will happen tomorrow? And we also can't end with "and we all died." And it was very sad, because obviously, we didn't, and here we are. So the sort of marriage, death, comedy, tragedy, like those typical endings of fairy tales are off the table for the memoirists. So, and tell me if you can see other ways between these, because I would love to see it being more nuanced, but I haven't been able to yet. I think in memoir, all we really have, we go through the woods, and we come to sort of a place where we can say, okay, here's what I've learned, or here's what it all adds up to. We've got either the option of change, I decided I would be who I really am, or I would leave Texas, or I would marry him after all, or I would have to make a large change in some way to align what I know life needs to be and what it currently is. Change is one option. And then the other, I think, is a sort of acceptance, surrender, yep, it's a flawed place, but Texas is my home. Or, yep, it's a tough relationship, but he'll always be my brother. There's the sense of I accept these terms, even if they're not perfect, which is a very kind of adult wisdom. But a fairy tale, of course, would not end in either one of those. That's right. Way too nuanced and way too, grayscale for the fairy tale. But I think and then there are other things that we can dig into. I think the imagery we should definitely look at too, because fairy tale imagery is sort of timeless and doesn't have logistics like parking tickets, but sort of sticks to the big epic essentials.
I would love the parking ticket complication. You have to, on the way to the ball, the pumpkin gets a parking ticket or something. You have to.
You should write that. You should write that.
I could see that being a thing. The modern New York fairy tale.
Totally, the pumpkin carriage is parked in the wrong zone. Yeah, totally.